Howard Bellinger died in a hospital bed in Spokane, Washington, with $2,100,000 in the bank and a pair of shoes by the closet door that he had owned for 11 years because he could not justify the cost of a new pair. He was 78 years old. The shoes had been resold 3 times. I am going to tell you about those shoes, but first I need you to understand something that took his daughter 4 years to understand after he was gone. Howard was not a poor man pretending to be poor. He was a rich man who had never once let himself believe he was allowed to act like one. By the time he understood the difference, there was no time left to do anything about it. Stay with me. Because if you have ever told yourself you would enjoy it later, once things were more secure, once the number in the account was a little higher, once you had earned the right to stop being careful, this is the story you need to hear, before later becomes a place you never arrive. What was in the account when Howard died? I will get there. First, I need you to meet him. Howard Earl Bellinger was born in 1945 outside of Yakima, Washington, the son of a man who had lost everything in a bad wheat year in 1953 and never fully recovered the trust he once had in stability. Howard grew up watching his father count and recount a small stack of bills at the kitchen table on Sunday nights, moving them from pile to pile as though rearranging them might make them multiply. He learned, before he was old enough to understand what he was learning, that money was a fragile thing, that it could disappear, that a man's job was to hold on to it as tightly and as quietly as possible. He carried that lesson into every decade of his life. He started a small electrical contracting business in 1971 in Spokane, with $800 and a used truck. He was good at it. Not flashy, not aggressive, just steady and reliable and willing to work longer hours than anyone else willing to bid the job. By 1985, he had 11 employees. By 2000, he had sold the company to a regional firm for an amount that, combined with what he had already saved and invested over 30 years, left him at 55 years old with more money than he had ever imagined having. He did not change his life. This is the part people find hardest to believe. He kept the same truck for 6 more years after the sale, an old Ford with a crack in the windshield he never replaced because the crack did not affect the wipers. He kept the same house, a modest 3-bedroom on the east side of Spokane that he and his wife Doris had bought in 1974 for $31,000. He kept the same diet, mostly, the same haircut from the same barber for 40 years, the same Sunday routine of reading the paper at the kitchen table with 2 eggs and 1 piece of toast, because a second piece felt, to him, like something he had not earned that particular morning. His daughter Linda used to ask him gently every few years why he didn't take a trip. Doris had always wanted to see the ocean properly, not just a day trip to the coast, but somewhere warm, somewhere with palm trees and a balcony and room service. Howard always said the same thing: soon, once things settled, once he was sure. Doris died in 2009. She never saw the palm trees. He kept the eggs and the 1 piece of toast, the truck with the cracked windshield. He kept telling himself soon, though soon had quietly lost the person it had originally been for. The breaking point, the one that took Linda 4 years to fully understand, happened on a Tuesday in his 84th. No, I want to be precise here because precision matters in this story. It happened on a Tuesday in February when Howard was 76 years old, 2 years before he died. He had gone in for what he thought was a routine checkup, a slight pain in his side that had been bothering him for a few weeks that he had not mentioned to anyone because mentioning things in Howard's particular grammar of living often led to spending money on things that might turn out to be nothing. It was not nothing. The doctor used the word concerning, then the word advanced, then 2 appointments later, a specific number of months, spoken gently, the way doctors learn to speak certain numbers. Howard drove himself home from that appointment. He did not call Linda. He sat in his kitchen at the same table where he had eaten 2 eggs and 1 piece of toast for 40 years. And he did the thing he had always done when something frightened him. He got out his ledger, not a financial planner's spreadsheet, an actual paper ledger, the kind he had used since 1971, with columns in his own handwriting. He added up everything: the investments, the savings accounts, the small rental property he owned outright on Garland Avenue, the proceeds from the business sale that he had never touched, sitting in conservative funds for 22 years, growing quietly while he ate eggs at a table built for a family that no longer gathered there. $2,140,000. He sat looking at the number for a long time. He told me later, this is the part Linda did not learn until after he was gone, because he told it to a hospice nurse named Patricia in his final month, and she felt Linda needed to hear it. That the number did not feel like an achievement that night. It felt like an accusation. He sat with a number large enough to have taken Doris to the ocean 40 times over, large enough to have replaced the shoes 100 times. And he understood, with total clarity, that he had spent his whole life protecting a number instead of living a life. He did not know what to do with that understanding. He was 76 years old, with 2 years ahead of him whose exact shape he did not yet know, and a fortune he had built with extraordinary discipline and never once let himself enjoy. The 4 things Howard came to understand in his final 2 years, I am going to tell you now, because Patricia the hospice nurse carried them to Linda, and Linda carried them to me, and I am carrying them to you. Because Howard, in the last conversation he had about it, said he wanted someone to know. He said it plainly to Patricia near the end. He said, I want someone to know what I figured out, even if I figured it out too late to use it. The first thing Howard understood came slowly, over the months following the diagnosis. He had achieved security, by any reasonable measure, decades before he died. He had never once allowed himself to believe it. There was always a slightly higher number that would mean he was finally, truly safe. A finish line he had already crossed required him to ask what he had actually been running for. That question was harder than running, so he had simply kept running. The second thing Howard understood came with a phone call from Linda in April, 3 months after the diagnosis. She had called to check on him, the way she called every Sunday, and somewhere in the conversation he had mentioned, almost in passing, that he was thinking about repainting the kitchen, something Doris had wanted done for 15 years, and he had always said was unnecessary. The cabinets were fine. Why fix what wasn't broken? Linda had gone quiet on the phone. Then she said, very carefully, the way you say something you have wanted to say for a long time, and have never found the right opening. Dad, you could repaint that kitchen 50 times. You could repaint every room in that house every year for the rest of your life, and it would not make a dent in what you have. Howard had not answered for a moment. Then he said, I know that, Linda. I have always known that. Then why? She asked, and she was not angry. She was something closer to heartbroken. Why have you lived like every dollar was the last one you would ever see? Howard did not have an answer that night. He thought about it for weeks afterward. The answer, when it finally arrived alongside the third thing he came to understand, which was harder than the first 2. because it implicated people he loved. Doris had asked for the ocean. Once, clearly, in 2003, on her birthday, sitting at the same kitchen table, she had said, "Howard, before I'm too old to enjoy it, I would like to go somewhere warm, somewhere with a balcony, just once." Howard had said soon. He had meant it when he said it in 2003. Believe soon was a real place on a real calendar he would eventually arrive at, once the business was more stable, once he was sure. He had been saying some version of soon for so long that he had stopped noticing it was a sentence with no destination. Doris died without the balcony. Howard understood, sitting with this 2 years before his own death, that he had not failed to give her the ocean because he could not afford it. Some part of him had needed the money to remain undisturbed more than he needed his wife to have what she had asked for, clearly, once, on her birthday. He did not say this cruelly to himself. He said it the way a man says a hard, true thing when there is no longer any reason to keep softening it. He had loved Doris completely, and he had still, somehow, loved the number in the account in a way that competed with that love and occasionally won. The fourth thing, the one that took until his final months to fully arrive, was the hardest. And it is the reason I am telling you this story at all. Howard understood that the shoes by the closet door, resold 3 times, owned for 11 years, were never actually about the shoes. They were never about money at all, not in the way he had always told himself. They were about a belief, planted in him at a kitchen table in 1953, that he did not deserve ease, that comfort had to be earned through continuous vigilance, and the vigilance itself had become the point, long after any reasonable person would have called the goal achieved. The shoes were not a financial decision. They were a confession, written in cracked leather, about what he had never let himself believe he was allowed to have. In his final month, with Patricia visiting 3 times a week, Howard did something Linda did not learn about until after the funeral, when Patricia sat with her at the kitchen table and told her gently what her father had asked her to pass along. Howard had asked Patricia to help him write 3 checks. The first was to Linda, an amount Linda would later describe as the kind of number that changes the shape of a life, though she never told me the exact figure. The second was to a young couple 2 houses down, people Howard barely knew except to wave to from the porch, whose roof had been damaged in a fall windstorm, and who Howard had overheard arguing quietly about how they would afford the repair. The third, the smallest, he used to buy himself a pair of shoes, good ones, the kind he had walked past in a shop window for 15 years, always telling himself he would buy them once he was sure. He wore them 4 times before he died. Patricia told Linda that he had worn them around the house, not outside, not anywhere special, just around the kitchen, standing at the counter, looking down at them sometimes, with an expression she did not have a word for. He told Patricia, in the last week, something he had never said to Linda directly, something Patricia felt was important enough to carry forward, even though it was not entirely her place to do so. He said, "I kept waiting for the day I would be sure it was safe to enjoy what I had built. I want someone to know that day never comes on its own. You have to decide it has already arrived, usually long before it feels true." He said, "Tell Linda not to wait for the number. The number will never feel like enough. Tell her to choose the day instead." He died on a Thursday morning in February, 2 years out the diagnosis, with $2,100,000 in the bank, having spent, in his final month, more on himself and the people around him than he had allowed himself to spend freely in the previous decade, combined. The shoes were by the closet door when Linda came to clear out the house. She almost gave them to a donation box without looking at them closely. Then she saw they were new, barely worn, the soles still showing the manufacturer's tread pattern, unlike every other pair of shoes her father had ever owned. She sat down on the floor of the closet and held them for a long time. She told me, when she shared this story with me, that she keeps them now in her own front hall, not to wear, but to look at, on the mornings when she catches herself saying soon about something she actually wants now. I'm going to ask you something honest, and I want you to actually sit with it before you move on to whatever comes next in your day. What are you waiting to be sure about? What is the version of repainting the kitchen that you have decided isn't worth it yet, even though you could do it 50 times over and it would not make a dent in what you have? Howard was not a foolish man. He was not careless or undisciplined or bad with money. He was, by every external measure, remarkably successful, and he still spent the overwhelming majority of his life protecting a number instead of living the life the number was supposed to make possible. If this reached something in you today, something you have been quietly waiting to feel sure enough to do, come down to the comments and write day 1. Tell me one thing, just one, that you are going to stop waiting for permission to do. It does not have to involve money. It might be a phone call. It might be a trip. It might be telling someone something you have been carefully not saying. I read every single comment, and if you know someone who has been saying soon for longer than feels reasonable, someone who is sitting on more than they are letting themselves use, send them this video. Don't explain it, just send it. They will understand why. I will see you next time. Thank you for being here.